Comprehensive Immigration Reform Act. So I do have my audience here today, and I just want to share a little bit of my history and experience with immigration. So my grandparents as well as my father are both immigrants, and they actually came over here when my father was around 2 years old. So my grandparents are from Michoacan, Mexico, and my grandma was actually the first one to come here first. So it was very hard for them to get their green card and for them to afford the money to even buy the application. The United States makes it difficult for immigrants to cross over. So what my grandparents had did was they had sent my grandma over here. She had gotten a fake ID, and she drove all the way from Michoacan, Mexico, all the way down to the Tijuana border to come to California. So when my grandmother crossed, she hid my father in the back and was praying that they didn't find him, and they crossed over successfully. So when my grandparents came over, my grandma had come, she brought my father, and my grandfather had stayed behind in Mexico because they needed more money to buy an apartment for them and for them to give my father the life that they wanted to. So when my grandfather had come over, he had came over with a group of people, and I believe his first attempt, he got sent back to Mexico. And I think that did happen a couple times until the last time he successfully came over. And he was reunited with my dad and his wife, which is my grandmother. So once they came over, they lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, and they had around, I believe, 4 kids at the time, which was my dad and my aunts and uncles. So my dad was the oldest, and when my dad wanted to sign up for wrestling, it was pretty hard because everything costs money, of course. So for immigrants, it's really hard for them to find housing and for them to find jobs, as well as getting a driver's license or any of the basic things you need to live here in California. So the United States does make it pretty hard for immigrants to have a good life over here, as well as having the fear instilled in them that they can at any time be pulled over and sent back to Mexico. So when my dad was in high school, he joined the wrestling team, but of course everything costs money, and at the time the value of a dollar was higher up, and so I believe it was a couple $100s that my dad needed for his letterman's jacket. And since my grandfather had all these kids and he was the only one working, and my grandmother of course was at home, she was cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids as a usual Mexican household is, and it was actually pretty hard for them to afford it, for them to afford schooling for their 4 kids and pay for all these extracurricular activities. So my dad ended up having to get a job, and my grandpa worked as in a industrial business, I believe, with phones, and he also had a job doing carpet cleaning, and they would take all the kids with them, and they would share the van, and they would take them to the carpet cleanings and come back. So in the United States, it's very hard for immigrant families to have a good life. When immigrants come over here, they come over here for a better life, and they look for better opportunities for their children or even themselves, because they want to take themselves away from whatever they were surrounded by, and they want to better themselves. People in America nowadays to have this perception of immigrants, which is that they come over here, they're illegal immigrants, they're aliens, as well as saying that, you know, they're coming here to steal the jobs. When in reality, immigrants who come over here are hard workers. You see people who are immigrants that are working in the fields to people who are working in corporate businesses. If you didn't know, the actual owner of the Hot Cheetos company is actually, he comes from an immigrant family. So there's always this perception that immigrants are always coming over here to do bad things, take jobs, and are always seen as they're coming over here to do bad things, when that is not the case at all. In the United States, former President Donald Trump would always refer to immigrants as illegal aliens and that we need to build a wall. When in reality, immigrants who come over here are nothing to what they are seen as in the United States. They're always percepted to be that they're coming over here to cause trouble, when in reality they just want to give their families a better life, just as people who are here want to give their children And that is why the Immigration Reform Act makes it easier for immigrants to come over. They would go through background checks and they would pay taxes just as normal United citizens would do. And it actually makes it easier for them to come over because at the moment, I believe it takes a couple years for people to get their green card, as well as you do have to take some tests and you have to study, and you actually have to like pass an actual test to also get your green card as well as pay. And that is also why you see individuals who seek asylum before they pay for the green card, because seeking asylum actually gets them over to the United States faster. They are processed faster. And it's honestly really sad to see that that is where they have to go in order to come here to look for a better life, when they could have a system that can support them financially to come over and have a better life. So that is why I gave the proposition of the Immigration Reform Act. And what we can do to actually promote this Reform Act is you guys can go to your city councils and you can go to the actual meetings, which I live in La Habra, so you can go to the La Habra council meetings, and they're always open to taking guests to come and speak up and talk about current